At first glance, Toshiro Mifune as Kingo Gondo seems a far cry from the rugged, wandering samurai that so typified his career. Gondo is a neat, well-dressed factory manager living in a 21st century house like an aquarium, overlooking a cramped industrial town. He holds court over a coffee table crowded with women's shoes. Gondo's business partners, they've come to complain that their profits have stagnated. They complain that the shoes they make are just too damned good, that they need to fall apart quicker so that their customers will buy more. Gondo, meanwhile, he believes in a shoe that's made to last. He believes in a sturdy instep and a heel that won't buckle, that a good product, built on a better reputation, that's the best way to a healthy and successful business. Inevitably, the meeting ends in shambles as Gondo's partners threaten to oust him from the company. But why women's shoes? Is it to say Gondo is any less masculine? Is it meant to subvert and deconstruct Mifune's wrecking ball samurai machismo? I don't think so, because Mifune as Gondo is still very much a masculine presence. He's gruff and he's callous, and he still has a glimmer of the samurai in his mercenary approach to business, acting out the part of the upstart feudal lord as he reveals his plot to buy national shoes out from under his partners before they can do the same to him. I think Mifune's character, in the business of women's shoes, in some ways represents a masculinity rerouted. Gondo is the samurai born too late. The man has worked his way up from the bottom, an apprentice at the factory from the age of 16, and maybe his passions that once upon a time may have been devoted to his lord, his land, and the hard clash of steel, have been forged not by any specific preference for ladies' footwear, but by force of habit, by necessity. Maybe Gondo has simply stayed where the money is, meeting the demands of a country that's increasingly become more modern, more Americanized, and where more and more women are entering the workforce. The typist, the secretary, the nurse, all of them in need of a good, long-lasting shoe, and Gondo there to provide. In the end, it's not so much what the man does exactly, but how well he does it. Even in the mundane, domesticated world of women's shoes, Gondo seems to embody and strive for some faint articulation of the Bushido code, a ruthless but just, business-as-combat mentality, where sacrifice isn't just demanded, but embraced as proof of conviction. Gondo is willing to give up everything, going so far as to mortgage his house and all his possessions to gain control of the company, and to make shoes the way he believes they should be made. It's not wealth or possessions that motivate him, but excellence. Unfortunately, none of that ambition or idealism amounts to much when Gondo's only son is kidnapped and the perpetrator demands a ransom so large it would make a controlling stake in national shoes all but impossible. It's a price Gondo is willing to pay, of course, because despite it all, it's his flesh and blood and an ultimate duty to his family that still matter most to him. But then it's revealed that it wasn't Gondo's son after all that was taken, but the son of his chauffeur, Aoki. It turns out the kidnapper has made a mistake, has mixed the two boys up. But rather than return the child, knowing a chauffeur couldn't possibly come up with such a large ransom, he maintains that Gondo himself must pay the money as planned. This puts Gondo in a dilemma. Does he pay the ransom for a child that's not even his, losing everything in the process? Or does he go forward with the buyout of national shoes and leave Aoki's son to the whims of his abductors? High and Low is divided fairly neatly into two parts. The first part deals primarily with the kidnapping, the negotiations with the kidnapper, and Gondo's wavering back and forth between whether he'll pay the ransom or not. This section is presented much like a stage play. Set completely within the confines of Gondo's orderly modern house on the hill, lengthy stretches of dialogue are often filmed in single, unbroken takes, with the camera pulled back so that each of the players, sometimes 8 at a time, are all in frame. The body language of each of the performers, particularly that of the cringing chauffeur Aoki, comes across like it's made to be read from the nosebleed section. Is it subtle? No, not really, but you can never say you don't know how anyone is feeling, or what their mood is supposed to be. The house itself is a perfectly ordered rectangle, and the world outside the huge panoramic windows reduced to simple theater backdrop. In the town down below, there's garbage floating in the river, there's tiny shacks hobbled together in the constant racket of the trolley line. Outside this house on the hill is the inevitable come-down of any industrialized society, is the made-to-break shoe heel of Gondo's business partners, the planned obsolescence of the working class. The thing is, it's not just one way, the view out these grand panoramic windows. If Gondo can gaze over the city from this lofty, voyeuristic remove, so too can the town look up at the man's house and, like a diorama full of paper dolls, watch and speculate upon the dramas therein. Somewhere, through a telescope, the kidnapper has been doing just that. Watching, waiting, and planning. The second half of the film, then, once Gondo has reluctantly paid the kidnapper's ransom and Aoki's child has been safely returned, focuses primarily on the police detectives as they track down the culprit. The film breaks free from the confines of Gondo's neat and orderly home out into the bustling streets of Yokohama, and what began as a tense chamber drama morphs into a methodical police procedural, where city life at its most mundane, its most routine, turns out to be the detective's most reliable asset. From the rail worker who knows the sound of every trolley, to the fishmonger who's able to match a child's drawing to the view of an island from on shore, to the observant old man at the junk pile furnace. All of them are integral at whittling away at the kidnapper's identity and whereabouts. It's interesting that it's the working class of Japan helping this wealthy businessman retrieve his fortune. Men who, like the kidnapper himself, may have spent their days looking up at that house on the hill and wondering, why not me? The detectives themselves have a similar working class bent. There's little of the glamour, dames, or punch-em-ups of a Philip Marlowe caper. Everything is achieved through 1 part legwork, 2 parts paperwork, and a little bit of luck. Eventually, it's revealed that their suspect isn't just the kidnapper, but a murderer too, having bumped off his accomplices, a pair of drug addicts, in response to them threatening him with blackmail. This is a good and probably necessary narrative development as it keeps the stakes high. After all, once the chauffeur's son is safely returned, without the revelation of the murders, it would be just a matter of money and of Gondo's professional career. Consequential, sure, but probably not meaty enough to hang a cat-and-mouse police thriller on. The act of murder helps to solidify in the audience's mind the lengths the kidnapper is willing to go to get what he wants. It mirrors Gondo's own do-or-die ambition in the face of his rivals at National Shoes. The final stretch of High and Low ratchets up the tension again as the detectives finally uncover the identity of the kidnapper and prepare to apprehend him. The man's name is Takeuchi, an intern at the local hospital, with no personal connection to Gondo whatsoever, apart from a gnawing resentment born out of looking out the window at the man's house up on the hill. A young medical intern, one might assume a man in Takeuchi's position, however dispossessed at the moment, would have had a bright future ahead of him. Well paid, well respected, maybe even a success to rival Gondo's one day. Is it impatience, then, that underlies his jealousy? Is it the same mentality of Gondo's business rivals when a shoe won't break down fast enough? Is it impatience and the withheld promises of modernity? The payphone, the trolley line, the cosmopolitan post-war nightlife? Is that what spurs him on? Is it that, like Gondo, Takeuchi is something of the samurai out of time? Is simply following his own tortured, circuitous path towards manhood, towards self-actualization. Maybe these are men who, like the country itself, find themselves suspended somewhere between tradition and modernity, where any attempt at reconciliation presents as but a confused lashing out. As the detectives trail Takeuchi through the bustling Yokohama nightlife, the film takes on the flavor of a crime noir, a certain dark stream of consciousness as cat and mouse weave through the night. Takeuchi dons a pair of dark sunglasses that reflect the light so that, in keeping with the Japanese title of the film, Heaven and Hell, he appears like some otherworldly ghost or demon. From swinging jazz nightclub to a dark alleyway crawling with drug addicts shuffling and skulking about like they've come straight out of Night of the Living Dead, here is a world in direct opposition to the typical Japanese reserve, a place that seems to exist only at night or when nobody else is looking. A dancing, cavorting hell. Eventually Takeuchi is apprehended and Gondo's money returned, unfortunately too late to prevent his debtors from claiming his house and all his possessions, or his ousting from National Shoes. The very last scene of the film has Gondo finally coming face to face with Takeuchi just before he's to be put to death. Two men whose ambitions have been thwarted and yet only one of them able to start over again. The doomed Takeuchi, he adopts a smiling, devil-may-care facade as he asks Gondo what he's been up to which Gondo replies he's begun work at a company that's smaller but offers him more freedom, and that he hopes to rival National Shoes one day. Gondo asks Takeuchi, why should we hate each other? He asks him, was your life really so miserable? Takeuchi replies, I'm not interested in self-analysis, but I do know my room was so cold in the winter and so hot in summer I couldn't sleep. From my tiny room, your house looked like heaven. Day by day I came to hate you more. It gave me a reason for living. Eventually Takeuchi's facade gives way completely to panic and fear, and with a final wretched cry, he's taken away. By the time the metal partition comes down between the two men, and the clinical peering into one another's lives is finally ended, there's a sense that Not too long ago, the whole thing might have been settled in simpler, more direct fashion, in a clash of swords on the beach.